Italian pine nut cake. Now, pine nuts take a little more finesse to cook with because they are so delicate. So, I'll measure 1/3 cup. And typically, when you buy pine nuts, they are untoasted. And these are going to be stirred into the cake. So to toast them, I'll just spread a single layer in a cake pan and pop them into a 350 preheated oven. Now, pine nuts take about 10 minutes to toast nicely, and you'll smell the oils toasting over that 10 minutes. So, for the cake batter, let me start with measuring 2/3 cup of regular sugar, and I'll add this to my mixing bowl, along with 2/3 cup of light brown sugar. This is a very sweet cake, and a typical Italian style cake. It's a single layer cake, there's no frosting or icing, but it is dense and sweet. I'll break 2 whole eggs over the sugar, and I'll separate 1 egg so the white goes into the batter, and I'll just set the yolk aside. What I want to do is whip the sugar and the eggs until they've doubled in volume and are thick and frothy. Beautiful, nice and light. Now, for the flavorings, I'll add a touch of vanilla, just a teaspoon. Citrus is a common flavor accent in Italian desserts, so just a couple teaspoons of grated lemon zest. The addition of the lemon and the vanilla really is subtle. Because pine nuts are so mild in taste, you want that flavor to be the dominant flavor. The next ingredient to add in, believe it or not, extra virgin olive oil, 1/2 cup of it. I love how the taste of the olive oil has a strength to it. It balances out the sweetness of all that sugar. And even the hint of bitterness that olive oil has adds to that balance. So while mixing, I'll pour that in. And the rest of the batter, I mix by hand. So now, I'll sift 1.25 cups of all-purpose flour over top of the batter. Along with 1/2 teaspoon of salt. The salt is in there to balance the sweetness of all that sugar. All right, now this is blended. It's time to grab the pine nuts from the oven. Oh, you can smell that gentle toasting. And you can see they're a nice light but even golden brown color. And because it's only 1/3 cup, I can add these warm to the batter. Toasting accentuates and also sweetens the flavor of rich nuts like pine nuts. And so now, this is ready for my pan. I have a 9-inch springform pan that's been greased, and I've lined the bottom with parchment paper. In goes the batter. And because this batter is a little dense, it actually holds the pine nuts in place so they don't sink to the bottom. They'll stay evenly distributed throughout the cake. Now, for the finishing touch, a sprinkle of pine nuts on top, just 1/4 cup. But this time, I don't need to toast them because the cake spends 40 minutes in the oven, and that surface contact with the heat of the oven will toast them beautifully. Now, as a tip, if you're cooking with a lot of nuts, the proper way to store them is in an airtight container, and you can keep them in an airtight container for up to 2 months. If you want to store them longer, then simply put them in the freezer. I've got my 1/4 cup of pine nuts, and I'll just sprinkle those evenly on the top of the cake. So my oven is still at 350, and the cake takes 40 minutes to bake. It'll be a beautiful rich brown around the outside and a golden brown on the surface. Oh, that beautiful color. Even the top of the cake looks like the color of toasted pine nuts. I'll let this cake cool completely in the pan, and I have one that's already cooled down. So you can see that beautiful golden brown tone and how the pine nuts on the top have toasted up beautifully. So I'll just run a palette knife around the inside of the cake to loosen it. So I'll slide this onto my platter. The nice thing about a dense cake like this pine nut cake is you can make it a full day ahead of time, and it is just as moist the second and the third day. Nuts in a cake, keep it moist. Now, a dusting of icing sugar. I love the simplicity of a beautiful cake like this. When you slice into it, crunchy top to it that will settle in if you make this a day ahead. Crackle, crackle. And then look at that beautiful cake. You can see the pine nuts dotted within there. A cake like this, I would serve on its own, just like this, or maybe with some segments of orange. So now that you're comfortable,